Everybody pretend to say, as we start, I'm asking to form a line over here as we accompany Rita on your last step. Come over and grab me. Paul, ready for me?
I'll be talking from here out towards it. Okay, that's all good. Just checking the volume here. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. Psalm 121, a song for ascents. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim, shamayim ve'aretz. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian. Adonai is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. Adonai will guard your going and coming, now and forever. Shalom, my name is Rabbi Finkel, and I'm honored to lead the service here on behalf of the Vine family as we honor the passing of Rita Vine, the daughter of Nathan Garfinkel and Rose Garfinkel nee Plosker. Rachel bat Nisan Verezel, who left us this past Thursday afternoon, June 23rd, 2022, or more formally on the Hebrew calendar, the 24th day of Sivan, 5782, at the age of 91, peacefully at the Simkin Center with her daughter Cindy by her side. Rita was predeceased by her parents and as well by her brother Irvin and sister-in-law Shirley Garfinkel, and by her best friend and beloved husband of over 60 years, Alec. Rita also brought a new generation into the world, and she is survived by her 2 children and 5 grandchildren. Her son Martin, or Marty, and his wife Pam, and her daughter Cindy and her husband Mark Streifler, and her grandchildren, Jordan and his partner Tali, Amy and her partner Liam, Riley and his fiancée Bev, and Jesse and Seth. And she was especially close with and leaves behind her niece Risa and nephew Harvey, and family all around the world. And of course she leaves behind many close friends, both Jewish and, quote, English, as you describe all her non-Jewish friends. So we gather here and online, both to mourn Rita's loss and to celebrate the gifts that she brought into our lives simply because of who she was. In Judaism, there are 7 acts of loving kindness, gemilut chasadim, and the first 2 involve death. Over the past days, our attention has been only on the first act of loving kindness, accompanying and today witnessing Rita's final journey from the moment of her passing until this moment as she reaches her final resting place beside her husband Alec. And she does so framed by our most time-honored Jewish traditions, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. First, the simple and beautiful act of Tahara, ritual washing at the Chesed Shalemis, and now here laid to rest in a simple wooden casket, constructed only with pegs and dowels, no metal hardware. Everything returned to ashes and dust, reminding every one of us that no matter how we lived our lives, no matter the riches or the titles we may have accumulated in our lives, we are equal in death. It is today, here literally at graveside, where we will complete this first act of loving kindness, first with our words, and then our prayers, and finally, as we cast earth together, the final act in Rita Vine's physical journey in this world. It will be at this point that we will move to our next act of loving kindness, and that of comforting the mourners. They too have only been committed to the first act. They have not taken the time to mourn. But this is the time, while we are still in Rita's presence, for us to start to share the stories of her life, so that we all come to appreciate that Rita not only has left a mark on all who knew her, but how she in turn made a mark in the world. I want to express my appreciation for the time spent with Marty and Cindy, together with Pam and Mark on Friday, and the wonderful stories they shared with me about the incredible values that their mother lived her life by, the values she instilled in her children, the joy she had in her grandchildren, her profound connection and pride in her Judaism. These are the stories that we will share not only today, but in the days and months and years ahead. And to start things off, I'd like to invite Cindy to offer her remarks and her stories.
With great sadness and much gratitude, I'd like to thank everyone that is here today to honor our mom, Rita Vine. Although we are saddened by the loss of a beloved family member, we celebrate the life of an accomplished woman, wife, mother, and grandmother. Rita was born in Winnipeg on September 7, 1930, and grew up in the south end of the city, which was somewhat unusual, as most of the Jewish community lived in the north end. She lived with her parents and various members of extended family in their grocery store, the building that we now know as the Garwood Grill, and attended Calvin High, from which she graduated. Rita worked as a secretary in the legislative building until she married the love of her life, our dad Alec, in 1953, and became a housewife and stay-at-home mom. She was a very devoted mother and a loving and caring daughter to her mother, who she looked after for many years. When faced with difficult times throughout our dad's lengthy illness, she demonstrated a strength and devotion that was an inspiration to all, first looking after him at home, then spending every day with him at the Simkin Center, where he spent his last years. Our mom came from a very large and loving family. Her mother had 11 brothers and sisters, so she had numerous cousins, many of whom she remained close with. She also kept in contact with her cousins on her father's side. She now leaves a void as the oldest living member on either side of the family. Those are big shoes to fill, as she kept in touch with so many, cousins from New York, Phoenix, Boston, and Calgary, her treasured niece Risa from Denver, her favorite nephew Harvey from just down the highway in Grosse Isle, and the children of her dear cousins, our 2 Auntie Bellas who passed before her. Our mom was a devoted mother who showed my brother and I how to raise wonderful humans. She was very traditional and firm in her principles. There was a great emphasis on doing the right thing. She enriched our lives with her love, caring, and humor, never shy to offer advice, whether wanted or not. If I were you was always a popular start to any conversation. She enjoyed watching us evolve and succeed in our careers, and let's be honest, she really loved watching Marty become a dentist and took every opportunity to refer to him as Dr. Vine. She took great pride in her grandchildren, Jordan, Riley, Amy, Jesse, and Seth. She was their biggest fan, and she so enjoyed hearing about their lives and accomplishments. Our mom was a wonderful wife who certainly taught by example how to have a beautiful marriage. Our parents were a great team and were happily married for over 60 years. They had so many lifelong friends, many of whom are here today, the Chisvins, Mrs. Hendon, lots of people. And they were happily married for over 60 years. They were engaged in numerous activities, such as Thursday nights bowling and Tuesday night, then later Wednesday afternoon Maj. Every Saturday night, they were out for a bite with their group from our childhood right up until my dad moved into the Simkin Center. And there was always a winter vacation to Hawaii, Las Vegas, or Mexico with various members of the gang. Rita was a true and loyal friend who nurtured her many friendships with her generosity and kindness and thoughtfulness. She made long-lasting connections and cherished her 2 best girlfriends from Calvin High, with whom she still spoke often. She remained close with her Maj group and developed new friendships in her later years as she navigated her new normal, living on her own with Alec, now a resident in the Simkin Center. Credit to her for being able to reinvent her life and welcome new friends and experiences at this later stage of life. Mom believed that it was important to give back to the community. She was very proud of her Jewish heritage and volunteered with ORT and other organizations over the years. While my mom was from a different generation, she could also be quite modern. She got a cell phone in her 80s and, as Riley referred to her, was a tech-savvy Baba. She loved game shows and old classics like Everybody Loves Raymond, as well as current shows like Grey's Anatomy, but also had some questionable taste and was, much to my surprise, an avid fan of 90 Day Fiancé. She was never late. Being on time meant arriving early, and my mom was always early for everything. She was certainly consistent. I don't know how I'll manage my evenings now that I won't get her nightly phone calls promptly at 7, right after Wheel of Fortune, to discuss what she should tune into that evening. She loved the Jets and the Bombers, always tuning in to TSN or Sportnet when a game was on. My mom was gracious and quietly determined. She loved to take care of others and advocate for them, as she demonstrated by the way she watched over my mother-in-law Sheila when she was in the Simkin Center. When Maria, Sheila's companion, wasn't there, my mom made it her business to make sure Sheila was well looked after with the dignity she deserved. And when Pam's dad Meyer became a resident, she did the same for him. My mom took great pride in her appearance and was always beautifully put together. Hair, nails, and outfit. Friday mornings started out with a wash, set, and kibitz at Victor's, then on to some grocery shopping and a trip to the library. She did like a routine. It is said in the Jewish faith that people never leave as long as you remember them. So today, after a life long lived, we will remember and celebrate our mom. We will cherish the long life she lived and the memories we made with her, rather than ask why we cannot have more. She lived a beautiful life, blessed with family and friends, and leaves us with many loving memories to hold in our hearts. I miss you already, Mum, but I learned that in French you don't say I miss you. You say, tu me manques, which translates to, you are missing from me. Mum, you are part of me that is now gone, but your legacy will live on through all the lives you've touched.
From the next generation, Jordan Vine.
Sad news. My mother had called me Thursday afternoon to tell me that our dear Baba Rita has passed. Good news. Everyone up in heaven now knows that Rita's son is a doctor, and as such, she will never have to wait in line for anything ever again. Baba was very proud of her family, a large, sprawling family from all over: Vancouver, Calgary, Boston, Denver, New York, Phoenix, Seattle, Israel, and Grosse Isle. 16 doctors and 7 lawyers. Few things gave Baba more joy than the phone calls from the out-of-town relatives checking in with her and letting her know how things were going on their end. She loved being the matriarch, the hub of this network of family, doling out sagely advice. In that sense, I liken her to a mob boss, Don Rita. And if you dared mess with her family, there would be a price to pay. I remember the story of when my dad was a child taking the bus home from school. He and his friends were acting like hooligans, and so the bus driver declined to let them off at their stop. This obviously made him late coming home, and that obviously made Baba's mama bear instincts kick in. So the bus driver finishes the route, loops back, and this time lets my dad and his friends off at their stop, where, unfortunately for the driver, Baba and her goon squad of moms were waiting. That was the last anyone ever heard of that poor bus driver. Some of my other favorite Baba stories from that time period include her throwing a fudgesicle in anger, and a large wooden spoon being used for discipline rather than eating. Baba was small but tough and wise. Baba knew the importance of a good work ethic and always putting your best foot forward. When my dad didn't want to study or do chores, she would tell him, if you work hard now, in the future you can become a doctor, and then you can take Fridays off to play golf. And look at him now. Even when she wasn't feeling her best, even in her later years, Baba insisted that if she was showing up to an event or a family dinner, her hair and makeup would be done to the best of her abilities. Those are 2 lessons that I hope that I can better integrate into my own life. But that doesn't mean that Baba didn't know how to let loose. Every once in a while, she would take out a fork and knife, walk over to the fridge and grab an Aero bar. She would then proceed to take the fork and knife and cut a single solitary piece of the bar, wrap it back up, and put it away. It was not uncommon for this single chocolate bar to last 2 adults a full week. Some of Baba's other guilty pleasures included Wheel of Fortune, The Daily Soaps, and 90 Day Fiancé. Riley would call Baba after the episodes aired, and they would break down which couples would and would not last. Here's a funny story that Amy wanted me to tell. When we were young, at birthdays, after the birthday person blew out the candles, Baba would make sure to take the candles and put them under her pillow that night, presumably for good luck. Sometime in the last few years, Amy, being the curious grandchild, asked Baba where this odd custom came from. Baba answers, "I told you that? Why would anyone put a used candle under a pillow? That's ridiculous." And despite being bamboozled by Baba, to this day, Amy still takes all the used birthday candles for good luck. For all the talking she did about doctors and lawyers, she certainly loved her 3 teachers, her executive assistant, and her childcare worker, aka her grandchildren. She had this blind confidence in us that was both irrational and comforting. You could tell her that you wanted to start a rock band on Mars, and she would say, "Oh, you're a smart boy, you'll figure it out." She was reluctant to take Advil because she thought it hurt her stomach. Eventually, she gave in, not because the doctor said so, or her children said so, but because I told her to, and for some reason, that was enough. even though it's not really a thing we say too often in the Vine Strifler family, we know she loved us more than anything else in the world. On one of my last visits to the Simpkin Center, I brought my new puppy, Archie, to visit Baba. She wasn't particularly interested in the dog, but she decided that the A in Archie stood for the A in my Zeta's name, Alec. At the time, I admit, I thought this was kind of silly, but looking back on that moment, I realized that Baba was right. The A is for Alec. And the R that comes right after the A in Archie is for Rita. And with that, Baba, we love you. We will miss you. We thank you for everything you've done for us and taught us. We will never forget you. And this year at Pesach, we will hoive to the heavens in your honor.
Thank you, Cindy and Jordan, for your beautiful words. You really give your mother and grandmother true honor by doing so. I heard many stories about Rita Vine, and so often they came back to two themes that intertwined with each other again and again. The first was how powerfully she lived in the Jewish traditions that her parents, who had been born in Poland, had instilled in her, yet she allowed the modern world into her life as well. She and her husband Alec had a profoundly loving relationship with clear traditional roles. He worked and she was a homemaker and always had dinner on the table at 5:30. And she made it clear about what a successful life should look like for her kids. Apparently, she started brainwashing Marty very early on. Be a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer, she would say, and you can make $20,000 a year. And as Marty told me, so I did. Cindy was told to marry a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer. And for Rita, the selected career paths for Cindy were to be a legal secretary or a dental hygienist, presumably because that would be a good way to meet and marry a lawyer or a dentist. Cindy did go on her own path somehow and was incredibly successful in the fashion industry, but she jokes that her mother probably didn't know what she or Mark really did for a living, but they did own a house and a couple of cars, so they must have been doing okay. And Rita carried on other traditions of her generation, the formality and respect between generations. To Marty's and Cindy's friends down one generation, she was never Rita, but was always Mrs. Vine. And Mark describes that even after he married Cindy, he could never quite call her Mom or Rita, so he'd either not call her anything at all, or in a pinch he would call her Mrs. Mother. Rita had a very good sense of humor, and used it especially if she wanted to pass on values or to make a point. She loved telling stories, but she also loved embellishing them, to the point where her kids never knew if they were true or not. And often the kids would turn to each other and whisper, "When did this happen?" Ultimately, though, it was never about the facts, or about making herself bigger than she was or the hero of a story, but rather it was the stories themselves that mattered. As Marty and Cindy described it, their mother knew everything about everything, knew exactly the way the world around her should unfold, and had no hesitation until letting you know exactly what you should do. And she was incredibly creative on how to pass on that advice to her children, and those stories, those mices, almost the booba mices, were often the path that she chose. But she was also funny in other ways. She would rename things with words that came from no known language. And these are words that the kids and grandchildren still use to this day. That squirrel over there became a veverkle. And a frying pan became known as a skrobodka. Skrovida. But even though she was fiercely traditional as a young mother not surprisingly, as a young mother in the 1950s and early 60s, she had a resiliency and curiosity about her, about what modern times could teach her, especially as her family grew and new generations came in. Not just about using a smartphone, but in accepting modern life. She came to understand that it was a good idea for young couples to live together before marriage, and she readily accepted and embraced non-Jewish partners for her grandchildren. And it was these things that suggested her other defining characteristic. I will use Pam's words. Rita was fierce about her people. There was nothing that they could do wrong, and this extended beyond her children to all 5 of her grandchildren, whom she loved very, very much. Everything was about family, and you did not miss with Mrs. Vine. And Jordan, I want to let you know, I have the bus driver story in my as well. It's a great story, and it really, really proves the point. No one messes with Mrs. Vine when it comes to her children. Marty could do no wrong, and the same thing applied for Cindy as well when they grew up. To the end of Rita's life, it turns out that Rita's kids and grandchildren really could do no wrong. The Simpkin Center became part of her life after a broken hip 2 years ago, and COVID had its impact, imposing long periods of isolation on a very, very sociable woman. But her family stayed available and attentive, and there was love and an ease right up to her very last days. She had the blessing of seeing her children in great marriages and as great friends with each other, seeking each other out socially and joyfully taking on the family traditions that she could no longer do. And her greatest gift, not only to her kids and her grandchildren, but to everyone who knew her, were the values that she embraced. There were 3 lessons that Marty and Pat and Cindy and Mark now carry with them as they now become the heads of their own families. The first was, in their words, we were taught by example how to live and how to raise good people. The second is we learn by watching. The way our mom lived shows up in us, and we see it showing up in all of our own kids. And the third is we were taught to do the right thing, although sometimes we would have to negotiate with mom about what those right things were. And finally, the kids figured out a profound truth, that her legacy will be her family, not just her biological family, but the way she treated and absolutely loved her friends as well. Those were her chosen family. I will add one observation from my very limited Yiddish vocabulary. Rita Vine, Rachel bat Nissen Verezel, was a Gitta Neshama, a very good spirit. May Rita's life inspire us always, and may her name always be for a blessing. Can you hear what's on? May it be God's will. We will be concluding this part of the service shortly with the El Malei Rachamim, both in Hebrew and in English, and then the Mourners Kaddish. But before doing so, I'd like to describe the remainder of the day. Immediately following our service here, there will be a meal of consolation at the Zedek Synagogue on Wellington Crescent, just east of the Maryland Bridge. As for Shiva, COVID is still present in our communities, and the family has chosen to sit Shiva privately on 2 evenings, tonight and tomorrow evening. But in the way of Shiva, this week is all about comforting the mourners. I encourage you all to reach out to the family when you have an opportunity to do so in the ways that you're most comfortable, to let them know how you feel, to pass on your comments, to listen to stories, and to tell stories as well. And finally, if you're interested in making a donation in Rita's honor, and this is a very, very strong custom in the Jewish community because it's almost a way of nudging people towards Gan Eden, towards the Garden of Paradise afterwards. The family has suggested you consider the Shaarey Zedek, or the Simpkin Center, or to a charity of your choice. I'll move now to the El Malei Rachamim, which is the one prayer which truly is a prayer of grieving and of loss. The Mourners Kaddish actually has nothing to do with grieving. It's a prayer we recite for other reasons. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachach Kanfei Ashchina, Im Kedoshim Utahorim, Bizahar Harakia Hamazirin, Et Nishmat Rachel Bat Nissen Verezel, Shalcha La'olamo, Ma'al Rachamim, Yastireha Beseter B'chanafav La'olamim, V'yitzror Hakayim Et Nishmata, Adonai hu nachalatam, v'tanuach b'shalom al kol mishkava, v'nomar amen. In English, may the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Rita's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of her love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all her worthy and righteous deeds, that her memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May Rita's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share not be severed in sorrow. May she rest in peace, and together let us say, Amen. Move now to the Mourners Kaddish, and I just want to say that The prayer is actually in Hebrew and Aramaic. The family have the readings themselves. If you know the reading, I encourage you to join on, if not just for Rita, but for anybody in your family that you've lost over time, or for the many Jews here and elsewhere who have no one left to pray for them. So the custom is, the way I like to do it is, the idea in Hebrew, in the Jewish tradition, is that if you don't know the words, if you say the word Amen, it's as if you said the whole prayer. Okay? So what I'm going to do when I reach that particular point in the Mourners' Kaddish is I'll raise my hand and encourage you to join me simply with the word Amen if you're inclined to do so. And again, stick with your own personal customs about your comfort level or not comfort level about saying the Mourners' Kaddish at a cemetery, at a funeral. May the love and eternal connection of our souls give us strength as we turn to recite the words hallowed by time. Sanctifying the name of God, we honor the memory of Rita Vine with the words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mourners' Kaddish. And together let us recite the words. Yitkadal, V'yitkadash, Shemei Rabah, B'yalma divrach hirute v'yamlich malchute, B'chayechon u'v'yamechon u'v'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabah mevarach le'olam u'amei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'tadar, v'taleh, v'talel, Shmei Dekudasha, Brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran v'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shemaya, V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Aseh Shalom b'mramav, Huya aseh Shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. And the last verse is in English. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life for us in Israel, to which we say, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. We're moving right now to the final acts as Rita completes her journey here on this physical world right now, and that's going to be the casting of earth. In Jewish tradition, to shovel dirt into the grave is a mitzvah, a righteous act which we do without any hope of reward. With this act, we take on the responsibility of caring for our loved ones until the very end. Our loved ones deserve to be buried by kind hands, knowing hands, sorrowful hands. You're invited to participate in this mitzvah. It is a painful act. However, one born of love and compassion for those who have meant so much to us. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. With Job we have said, God you have given, God you have taken away, blessed be the name of God. May the memory of Rita Vine be a blessing as we mark that her essence will never leave our hearts and our souls. I'm going to describe the customs that we have for the burial right now, and again, you may each have your own individual choices as well. We'll start with the family, and the framing is that you can use up to 3 shovelfuls in. Some people use the back of the shovel, some of the front, and then cast the earth in. But I'm going to ask you to do something very specific. When you're finished with your shovel, put it back in the pile. And there's a reason for this. To take the shovel, to offer the shovel to someone else or for them to take it, makes that task an obligation. To put it down and pick it up means that I'm taking on this out of honor and love to do so. So again, just keep that particular custom in mind. I'll ask the family to start. And again, I'll ask you all to remember the importance of this community here. We are here for the Vine family. Every one of you is here for a reason because of the losses you have. Use the time in the days and weeks ahead to remember why she was on this earth, the gifts that she gave you, and to be sure to tell those stories, and may her life shape yours as well.